With the help of Hashem, we are going to be making the Siyum on Massechta Rosh Hashana, learning Daf Lamed Hey. Really, we are up to Daf Lamed Daled Amid Beis, all the way on the top line. We are learning now about the sugya of Tkiyah Shofar, with all the specifics about the blowings of the shofar. There's a moedidik word from the Avnei Nezer that being that we celebrate Rosh Hashana, certainly Kishitas Rabbi Eliezer on the day that Adam Harishon was created. And regarding the creation of Adam, it says in the Torah, Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim, that Hashem blew into his nostrils the neshama, the breath of life. So it's gavaldik that on Rosh Hashana, the mitzvah is a mitzvah of blowing, almost like we're blowing back to Hashem. As Chassidus emphasizes that whoever blows from his innards. That's why people get exhausted if they blow out a lot. In other words, that just like our neshama comes, as the Alter Rebbe writes, as a chelik elekami mal mamish, and one of the sources for that is from the Vayipach. So our avoida, there's words that express our mind. You have music that expresses our hearts. And the neshama, the mitzvah of the shofar, is an expression of the essence of our very being. Now, we began the sugya of Rabbi Yechanan regarding what were to happen if a person were to hear all of the soundings of the shofar, and going back that it began with blowing 3 sets of tarat, but the person did not hear them consecutively. Truth be told, we already learned that the ideal way of the blowing of these 3 groups of 3 is in conjunction with the psukim of Malchiyos, Zechronos, and Shofros. Okay, but after Malchiyos, you're supposed to blow Tkiyah, right away Tkiyah. What happens even if a person blew Tkiyah, and a long time passed, there was a pause until the Truah was blown, etc. So we just learned, Mamash, on top of the Amid, that Shitas Rabbi Yechanan is that you're Yoitze. In other words, the pause does not affect a halachic break, and a person fulfills their obligation. We're going to see ultimately that this is really subject to a machloikas. We're going to go further, again emphasizing the ideal importance of sounding the shofar within the Seder of the Shemona Esrei. And as we had at the end of the Mishnah, we learned yesterday, the final Mishnah, we're going to have the final sugya will be a little bit broader than just Rosh Hashana, but we're going to go and take a broader step back as to what is the function of the Shliach Tzibur, how much power does the Shliach Tzibur have, or as we read the words in the Mishnah that the Chachamim hold, that if a person knows how to daven Shemona Esrei, they should daven it on their own. And the function of the Shliach Tzibur is simply to help those who don't know how to say the words of the Shemona Esrei, to say it on their behalf. And let's now, as we said yesterday, use the tool of Shomeya Ko'ina. And really, as we're going to dive into this sugya, we're going to see that it's much broader. And actually, Rabban Gamliel understands that the main tefillah is the tefillah of the Shliach Tzibur. And not only is his tefillah the main tefillah, but as he says in the Mishnah, that the Shliach Tzibur can lachatchila be moitzi, even someone who has the ability to daven on their own. Now, what does that mean today when you are in shul, that you should not daven your silent Shemona Esrei? According to his opinion, you can listen to the Shliach Tzibur. So the Gemara is going to clarify this machloikas, and we're going to share b'kitzur a phenomenal insight that the Rebbe has when the Rebbe makes one of his Siyum on Rosh Hashana, as it's printed in Likutei Sichos Chelik Chav Daled on page 95, a Sicha on the month of Elul. But this is going to be very much aligned, and this is going to shed light in a beautiful way that the group of Brisk, they were the understanding of our sugya. And just to share it in the intro, is that really there are 2 types of prayers. This is what many will call a tefillah bitzibur, which means I'm davening, you're davening, he's davening, yichidim are davening bitzibur. That's the silent Shemona Esrei. And by the way, Tefilla b'tzibur is only Tefilla b'tzibur if we all daven at the same time. But everyone is davening their own b'tzibur. And then there's another concept, which is what Rabban Gamliel is celebrating, and that is what many call Tefilla shel tzibur. Tefilla shel tzibur means it's not yichidim davening together. There's a communal prayer. Very much like in the Beis HaMikdash, there was a communal carbon tamid. I didn't bring my tamid. You didn't bring your tamid at the same time. There is one carbon that's brought on behalf of everyone, and the machlekes will be really, the way the Rebbe words it, what is the main tefillah? And we'll see how this taka fits, as the Rebbe explains with the Rabban Gamliel, according to his tchunas hanefesh, as he was the nasi, and as we will connect this to the story we have in Brachas, Daf Chav Zayin, Daf Chav Ches, with Rabban Gamliel being very meticulous and not allowing everyone in the Beis Medrash. Whoever's not Toichei Kabari was not allowed in, and only after he was demoted, at least temporarily, when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah became the nasi. So really, we're gonna share a Gevaldike insight, and let's start on Daf Lamed Dalid Amid Beis all the way on top. Again, we quoted Rabbi Yochanan. Yes, you're supposed to blow tarat, tarat, tarat in a unique seder, and as this developed, and as we quoted yesterday, the source, which is Rabbi Abohu, who made a takana bekeisari, that really we blow tashrat, tashat, and tarat. They should be blown in their proper sequence, but when you start blowing, you blow one after the other, especially every group, every triplet, tkiya, trua tkiya. However, if you spread it out, not by making other sounds in between, but that's a hefsek, but you took a pause, so you're yoitz. Okay, Tanya nami hachi. We find the brayso that substantiates, that will be the backings of Rabbi Yochanan. Now we learn a Tanach. Shama teisha tkiya is beteisha shos bayoim. Imagine one sound, tkiya. It took you an hour until you heard the trua. Another hour until you heard the tkiya. You're yoitz. However, now here we're going to have various versions, 3 lines from the top. If you hear all of these original 3 times, tarats, which is 9 soundings, 9 blasts, if you heard them at the same time from 9 different people, that's our girsa. Says the Braisa, you're not yoitz. Now here we have a problem, and let's learn Rashi, and then we'll learn Tosfos, and we have time. So Mishtisha b'nei Yodam Kecha lo yotza, top Rashi. Now second Rashi from the top. Why are you not yotzi? Because of the rule that Terei Kali lo mishtami. Because a person cannot hear 2 sounds at the same time. Says Rashi, Kach pirsha lefi masher kasav basvarim. Rashi is quoting that which he read in many svarim. And we all understand the problem with that, because it's not that long ago that we actually learned that if something is beloved to a person and they make an effort, they are able to hear 2 sounds at the same time. Valav Milsa, he fragt Rashi on that pshat. The Ha'akimna, mamish right now in Daf Chav Zayin, that Terei Kolim and Terei Gavri Mishtoi, as the Bach adds, when there's a chavivus, when you love, when you're very into what you're trying to hear. Okay, so that's a problem with this pshat. So therefore, Rashi teaches, as Vos, he has a different girsa. Mites b'nei Adam ki echad, says Rashi, yes, you're yoitzer, the opposite. Since people love to do the mitzvah of hearing the sounds of the shofar, even if it's blown together, they make the effort. Now, the other Rishonim that argue with Rashi hold that when we learned on Daf Chav Zayin, that if there are 2 sounds being happening at the same time, when it's chaviv on the person, you can hear, it's not pshat, you can hear both. The sugi we were learning above is that in the Beis Hamikdash, they would blow the shofars with chatzotzres. So since the ikar mitzvah is with the shofar, if it's chaviv on a person, they can hear the shofar and ignore the chatzotzres. But here, you have to hear at least all of these 9 koilos before the babo, tarat, tarat, tarat. They're being made at the same time. So if I would only have to hear the tkiya, so then if it's chaviv, I can ignore the trua. But to hear the tkiya and the trua, zoisloi. Obviously, Rashi does not subscribe to that. Rashi holds that if it's chaviv, you can hear both. Gavaldik.
Remember when it says 9 kolos at the same time, it's Mama's talking about all 9 at the same time?
All nine at the same time.
But what about like 3 or 4? I mean, you see trey kolos.
Yeah. It doesn't make a difference. Okay, so just Shuki's just pointing out that obviously from here you see clearly that it's not trey koli mishtami when it's chaviv, but not 3. No. But again, the question is, does the person have a power to ignore the others, to be able to hear one? Or, the way Rashi understands, you are mamish hearing, you're hearing each one. You can hear both at the same time. So that's one big topic. Quickly, Tosfos. The top Tosfos. In other words, first of all, Tosfos doesn't have the gears of Rashi. Rashi says yatsa, Tosfos says lo yatsa. And he brings down the hiksha bekontra samai lo yatsa asikna liel the trei koli mitrei gavra mishtami. So Tosfos has a gewaldige answer without changing the version. You know what his answer of Tosfos is? He agrees with Rashi. You can hear two sounds at the same time, both. But you have to hear the tkiya before the truah, and you have to hear the tkiya after the truah. Tarat. Here it's being blown together. Who cares if you can hear it? Yes, you can hear it. Lo yotza. Because there has to be a tkiya prior and a tkiya post, not at the same time. So it's not about you hearing all of the sounds. So you can hear many sounds at one time. There is a seder that's essential. Now, what we're learning from Rabbi Yechanan is that when we say a tkiya prior, of course, ideally prior means immediately prior. Rabbi Yechanan is saying, the Tanach is saying, if there was a pause, it's okay, but it has to be prior. And then there has to be a tkiya post. With all of the drushes that we know, the tkiya is the seamless, wholesome connection to Hashem, an experience of life. And then you have life. For most people in Golus, it's od gahak teher and gahak tahin mekrech tzavasab the trua. And then there's our emunah that it's going to be good tkiya gedolah. In other words, that you can't experience two emotions at the same time. That would more or less be the machlekes, even though we know from Tanya, quoting from the Zohar, that you could. But these are only great people, that they can have joy and sadness at the same moment. Most people, so there is the moment of tkiya, and we all, God willing, we should have many moments of tkiya, and from that we get the koyach, that while we're undergoing a truah, we stay connected. So that's Tosfos' explanation, that you still are goyres lo yatsa, even if today call a mishtami at the same time. Beautiful. Weiter. Fourth line from the top. Aflamet dalad amid base. Now another thing. Tkiya mizeh truah mizeh yatsa vafilu b'serugin. Right? And here we're adding vafilu kolayim kulam. End of quote. In other words, we're emphasizing that there can be a pause. Now you would think from the first line in the Braisa, maybe the reason why a pause does not disrupt halachically is because it came from the same person, even from different people. And 9 hours doesn't mean 9 hours. It can be the whole day. It can be 12 hours. We have to blow the shofar by day. That we learned yesterday, right? By yoim, say that. Okay. Now asks the Gemara, "Mi Amar Rabbi Yechanan Achi, is this the sheet of Rabbi Yechanan? V'ha Amar Rabbi Yechanan mishum Reb Shimon ben Yehoy Tzadok." Regarding something similar that we are comparing to the case of the shofar, that person paused in the middle. There we clearly state that the length of the pause will have a halachic consequence. If the pause was for the amount of time, this is very subjective, and this is where you're at. In other words, if I am at a place in the halal that for me to finish halal, I need 5 more minutes. I need another 20 minutes, whatever it is. And my pause was more than that time. During that pause, I could have finished. Ooh, that's already too long. The quantitative time of the pause will affect, and it's going to break the halal. And then the din is, Rabbi Yechanan quoted this Rebbe who said, Chayzer l'rosh. So l'chayra, I get it that we should tolerate a pause, but there should be a limit of that tolerance. There should be a time that if you could have finished all of the 9 soundings, then why not Chayzer l'rosh? So the Gemara, instead of differentiating between halal and the reading of the Megillah and shofar, the Gemara is not challenging that at all. The Gemara is saying that there is a machlokes amoraim. Obviously, it must be there is a machlokes tanoim, because we just quoted the Tana that says what Rabbi Yechanan says. But there's Rabbi Yechanan, and then there's Rabbi Yechanan quoting his teacher, Rabbi Shimon ben Yoed Tzadok. No, it's like Kasha. The day Rabbi Yechanan himself holds that that a pause does not halachically create a hefsek. That his Rebbe was the one that held that there is a limit to how much we tolerate a pause. Hold on, you're telling me that Rabbi Yechanan himself, again, Take holds that we're not bothered by an interruption. And here we have an interesting, just like we just see that Rabbi Yechanan doesn't always agree with his Rebbe, Rabbi Abo, just to know, is the Talmud of Rabbi Yechanan. And now we'll see again about, what comes around goes around. So Rabbi Abo, Lavdafke held like everything like his teacher. Rabbi Abo, a story. He was once walking behind Rabbi Yechanan, and this goes on the student, this goes on Rabbi Abo, he was reading the Shema. When they came to filthy alleyways, we learned to sugi and brachas. For example, there's excrement. There's something that smells very bad. with all of the halachas. Now, by the way, as we'll see in a moment, we do have this difference that we learned over there. We'll chazer this in a moment, whether a person is standing. That's a lot more problematic if you're standing stationary in a place where there's a very bad odor. Also, and in the proximity of, and you can see it with all the details, then you can't say words of kedusha. You can't even be mahared. But if you're walking, even though you're walking by, we'll see in a moment, many are lenient. Obviously, Rababo felt you have to stop. That's a given. Now the problem was, so Ishtek, he was silent. Basar the Chalef, now that they went, they're not longer in that area, there isn't, according to any opinion, a problem with continuing to articulate words of Kedusha. So Amar Lei, now he happened to be behind his teacher. So he asked his teacher, now by the way, did he ask him verbally? He's in the middle of the Shema. Whether he asked him with an emes, that's the big topic here, but he asked Rabbi Yechanan, Ma'u ligmoir. What's the alternative? Go back to the beginning. In other words, there was a pause, there was a hefsek. And Amalei Rabbi Yechanan told his student that im shahisa kadei ligmar eskula. Clearly, it depends. If the break wasn't that long, during that break you would be unable. This is subjective. The way you were reading the Shema to finish it, then it's fine. But if the break was so long that during that break you were able to finish the ganze Shema, so then chayzer l'rosh. He's telling that to Rabbi Bo. So Rabbi Yechanan himself subscribes to we tolerate a pause only up until a point. And that's the point. So the Gemara says, Gavaldik, that this is what Rabbi Yechanan is really telling a student. And it's, let me just say it out by heart. Rashi, there's another machlekes like we mentioned. Do you b'chlal have to stop when you're saying the Shema if you are only walking by a filthy place? Rabbi Yechanan held you don't even have to stop. You don't even have to stop. Rabbi Bo held you have to stop. And now let me add a linkage between one. So that's one machlekes. So clearly Rabbi Yechanan saw that Rabbi Bo does not agree with him. Had Rabbi Bo agreed with him, you b'chal don't have to stop. But it's not only since you don't agree with me in one, you don't agree with me in the other. No. It's not that. It's that there's a big difference as to why one paused. This is the way many Rishonim learned the sugya. It makes a lot of sense like this. If I was forced to stop, that's a much worse. That's a break. Forced meaning halachically. If the Torah says you may not, that's mamash a pause. What Rabbi Yechanan was speaking above is that the person should have blown tarat, and for whatever reason, but it wasn't obligatory, they chose to stop. A pause that's by choice is not that strong. That is where Rabbi Yechanan holds that even if you pause the whole day, as long as at the end of the day you heard all of the sounds, you're good. So he says to Rabbi Bo like this, that why did you stop? Is that you don't say, if you would hold like me, if you would not have to stop, but you only would have opted to stop, then Rabbi Yechanan Taka holds that even if the pause was the whole day, you don't have to go back to the beginning. By the Shema. But you who stop because you don't agree with me that you are allowed to say the Shema. You hold like the other shittas that hold that even if you're only walking through a filthy place, you are mechuyev to stop. If you stop because you're obligated to stop, by the way, even Rabbi Yechanan will hold that then if you paused, that's the way we learn. That's why Rashi brings in Rashi brings both. You didn't have to stop. I also hold that when you do stop, doesn't matter how long. But this Allah, you who clearly hold that what? That you were obligated to stop. Once you're obligated to stop, then the pause has a greater disruptive power. Let's word it that way.
So what does he hold when you have to stop, Rabbi Yechanan?
Rabbi Yechanan also, that's the way we're learning it. Rabbi Yechanan holds that if you're mechuyev to stop, then he also agrees that if the pause was kedei ligmar kulai, then you got a problem. That's the word. It's beautiful. Okay, next. Kiyos, ein ma'akvazu azu, brachos, ein ma'akvazu azu. Guys, like always, there's so many different ways of learning. We're learning the way Rashi learns. According to Rashi, the opening statement of the Braisa.
Sorry, just going back. Does that mean he doesn't disagree with his teacher? And why can't you use this answer for the difference between him and and his Rebbe, where we said, oh, he holds differently. Why can't you just say, no, that was where he was forced?
Could be some achronim learned that way. The challenge, the reason why that the whole drasha was given over here was because people are bothered with Rabbi Bo Taka not listening to his teacher, and like Mimonavshach. You know, that Rabbi Yechanan didn't always follow Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzaddik is not that bothersome. But when you have a Talmud that's walking behind his Rebbe and he's asking his Rebbe what to do, where do you find a Rebbe that's telling a student something that he doesn't agree with? You understand, Danny? No, it's okay.
But that's actually the answer. He actually said,
I know that was the answer, but I'm saying that just differentiates that Rabbi Yechanan never asked Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzaddik in a Ma'aseh B'Poil and a Ma'aseh Rav what to do. It doesn't bother us that much if Rabbi Yechanan doesn't agree with his teacher. It bothers us a lot more. It doesn't make sense that Rabbi Bo, who's asking a shayla to Rabbi Yechanan, if you're asking me a shayla, I'm going to paskin the way I hold. I'm not going to paskin the way you hold. Then don't ask me. So that was the word that even Rabbi Yechanan, it would be moida that if you're mechuyev to stop, if you're mechuyev to pause, it's considered a hefsek. Okay, let's go back. Now, listen, we're going to learn it's mamash a good lead up already into times. If, God forbid, whenever there is a communal tzara based on our emunah in Hashgacha Pratis, we never say mikra nikra. In other words, there's a pandemic and it looks like random who got sick and who michya umi yamus. We don't believe in that. We believe that it was whoever, God forbid, suffered, it was for them. Everything is b'hashgacha pratis, and if there's a lot of communal people suffering, so part of our reaction will be to make a collective introspection. Not, God forbid, that every time a person suffers, they're sinners. Chas v'shalom. But when I suffer, I have to be open for me that I yifashresh b'myself. When I see you suffering, it's cruel for me to say, you sinner, you deserve it. But we are suffering, community is suffering. Part of the Yifashvesh b'maisav was making a fast day. And as we'll learn in next Massechta, it wasn't only one fast day, there was a series of fast days. And if Hashem did not yet in a revealed way respond, but if the drought continued, so there was groups, and as the time went on, it became more serious. The halachas of the fast days became stronger, including two dinim. That in the latter series of fast days, we add 6 brachas in the Shemona Esrei, 6 additional brachas for that unique tzara, and there would be the soundings of trumpets. Now, what happens if we're living in a place where we don't know what brachas to add, or we don't have trumpets? That's the first statement of the Braisa. Do we say that during those latter tiny tzibur, it's a sum zero game? You want to make it good, add the brachos, blow the trumpets, and if you have one without the other, says the Braisa, we don't say that. If we only have the trumpets, but we don't know the 6 brachos to add. I know the 6 brachos to add. We're the chevra, but we don't have trumpets. Do one without the other. That's the way Rashi teaches. Tkiyos, ein ma'akva zu azu, according to Rashi, doesn't mean one sound with the other. The ein ma'akva zu azu, says Rashi, the tkiyos are not ma'akiv the brachos of the fast days. Brachos meaning everyone knows the Shemona Esrei, but the 6 additional brachos, and the brachos are not ma'akiv the tkiyos. That's the way Rashi learns. It's one statement. Next, now we're going to Rosh Hashana. Now we're going to Yovel Yom Kippur. Tkiyos ubrachos Rosh Hashana Yom Kippurim. They are ma'akvos, meaning important. Now it changes. Not tkiyas and brachas, the tkiyas and the tkiyas. In other words, if a person cannot do all of the sounds for whatever reason, many people would. Is there like there's chatzi shiur by an aveda? Is there a chatzi shiur by a mitzvah? Or the brachas? We can't say malchiyos the chreinish and soifris. For some reason, I only know the psuke malchiyos. My machzor has the other pages torn out. So do we say do half? Many people would. At least do half. That the Braisa says no. That the tarat, the 3 tarats, this is the mitzvah. If you don't do that, you're not doing anything. The mitzvah of adding malchiyos, yechronis, v'shoifres is one mitzvah. And if you can't do all of the brachas, do none of the brachas. We're not linking the tkiyas and the brachas here. Fakert, just like in the first stanza on Rosh Hashana, if a person doesn't have a machzor, they should blow the shofar. If a person doesn't have a shofar, they should daven the malchus, of course. But here in the tkiyas themselves, The brachas themselves are ma'akvis. And my tama, Omar Rabba, Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Imru Lefanav Rosh Hashana, Malchiyos, and Zechronos, and Shoifros, meaning it's one package. Malchiyos Kadesh Adam L'chunei Aleichem. Zechronos Kadesh Yavayel Lefanai Zichronechem L'toiva Ubameo B'Shoifar. Now, there's a huge difference, just to make it clear. I know it's in this topic of, is doing half of mitzvah valid? Let me just differentiate between a person is supposed to eat a kazayis of matzah. If I don't have a kazayis of matzah, is there any value of me eating a half a kazayis? Or better, there's only one kazayis, it's me and you. So should we say both of us should eat half? And both of us did some. Or if half of a mitzvah is nothing, then only one should eat. It's a chaval to divide it. Eating a half a kazayis of matzah is a quantitative issue. The matzah is matzah. But the Torah says, eat. Eat means eat a kazayis. If I'm eating half, I ate the matzah less than the amount. Here, the pshat is much more than that. Malchiyos Zechronos v'Shoifros is a mitzvah. Saying some of them would be tantamount. What happens if a yid, instead of having the 4 parshiyas, they only have 2 parshiyas? That's nothing. That's not the mitzvah. It's an eichus question. The mitzvah is to take daled minim. So a person would say, I don't have the daled minim. I'm going to do half a mitzvah by taking the lulav and the hadas. That's nothing. That's the word. Even according to those who hold that a chatzi mitzvah, similar to a chatzi shir by an aveda, has some value. That's if you are doing the whole mitzvah with a half of quantity. But if the mitzvah itself is lacking, then you have nothing. And that's what Rashi is understanding and other in this pshat in the Braisa. That the mitzvah of the tkiya is not one sound. The mitzvah is tarat, tarat, tarat. The mitzvah of the bracha is malchiyos zechronos v'shoifros. Do that, and if not, you're doing nothing. Okay. Misha Beirach, going back to the Mishnah. Even though ideally we should blow the shofar in conjunction with, and it began with the repetition, that was the original. Then we added it also to the silent Shemona Esrei. Then they added the tkiyos prior to, but let's go to the beginning, when they only made 9 sounds. Tarat, tarat, tarat. Together with malchiyos, tarat. Zechronos, tarat. Shofros, tarat. Says the Mishnah, if a person, when they were davening Shemona Esrei, there wasn't a shofar in the shul. So they davened the Shemona Esrei. Now they're going to blow the shofar, says the Mishnah. You don't have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. You should do it together with the brachas, but if not, it's okay. Which means, says the Gemara, Taima, the reason why you can do it later, it's not ideal, because the lehava le shofar meikara. Ho hava le shofar meikara. But if you had the shofar, then kishamalahu, when you listen to the shofar, aseder bracha shamalahu, right? And actually, what we will see is no, not so simple. It will depend whether you're davening b'tzibur or whether you're davening b'yachid, which will be the lead up to the next sugya. And as we'll see in a moment, that if a person if there is no tefillah b'tzibur, then you should blow the shofar prior to musaf, which is mamash what we do, and not during. During is by the shliach tzibur. Now that we're davening in a shul with a shliach tzibur, we blow it during, even by the tefillas yachid. But if there's b'chlal no tzibur, don't learn from the Mishnah the way we're saying right now. Always blow on the Shemona Esrei. Says the Gemara story that Rav Papa Bar Shmuel kam litzaluyeh. He was once davening b'yachidus for whatever reason. So as he's about to daven this, there's no repetition. He's davening a silent Shemona Esrei, and he told Rav Papa either didn't know how to blow, or ideally, if you're davening Shemona Esrei, you should not blow. Whatever the story was, he was not the toikeya. Amalei l'shamoy. So he told. Shamoy means his attendant, whom he entrusted with this awesome mitzvah, blowing the shofar for him, that kinehir nalach. It's an interesting lashon. Kinehir nalach means when I'll enlighten you, not when I'll speak to you, because that's the whole point. He was davening a silent Shemona Esrei. Well, by Shemona Esrei, really we're not supposed to signal to anyone. This whole thing is problematic. On the other hand, many people have a minhag that daven relatively loud, especially when they're biyachid. So maybe that was the nihir nalach. Maybe it doesn't mean a hand signal. I know many people touch it means a signal. Lechina means I'll cough. I'll make a certain some signal, or whatever. That's a nice topic, but not for now. So when I'll show you that I'm up to the right place, and like we learned that we paskin like Rabbi Akiva. In other words, we put a malchiyos with kedushas hayoim, and afterwards, right? Melech hakol haaretz mekadosh aliyah mazikarim shoifer zoicher abris shomea kol truas ami yisrael barachman. So when I make you the simanim, blow for me. Where did he get it from? He understood it from our Mishnah that ideally the shofar should be blown together in the Shemoneh Esrei. Now our Mishnah was speaking about Betzibur. He was davening b'yachid. That's the difference. So Amalei Rava loy amru ela b'cheverir. Cheverir means when you're davening with the chever, when there's a minyan. That is when we blow during. And if you're not in the minyan, blow prior. I know it doesn't say it here, but that's one of, now that we're adding all of these koilos, we take a blow the shofar, what we call tkiyas, the miyushav, prior. Tanya namiyachi, kishu shemeya, kishu shoyman ala seder. This seder means that it has to be tkiya through a tkiya, and not let's say through a tkiya. It's not that we have to hear the sum total of the sounds. The order is essential. It can be with a pause according to Rabbi Yechanan, but it has to be a tkiya, sandwiched in between is the trua and then the tkiya. Another din, I'll say the brachas, meaning during the Shemoneh Esrei. Indeed, only bechaverir. Bechaverir is our way of the Brisa saying with a minyan, when there's a group, first wide line. But if you are not davening with a minyan, chevre, then shoyman al ha-seder, you taka have to hear the same seder, which is what we do. Seder means by us, tashrat, we do tashrat 3 times. Everything is 3 times. Tashat 3 times, Tarat 3 times, but the Shaloy al Seder brachas, not during the Shemoneh Esrei. When? Prior. Another than second line. The Yachid Shaloy Taka. Don't think that you have to blow for yourself. Chaveroi tekei aloi. Now we touched upon this yesterday. According to those who hold that the mitzvah is only to listen, there's no chiddush and perhaps no need to say this. But since there are those who hold that the mitzvah is to blow, not to hear, so one might have thought if the mitzvah is to blow, then everyone should have to do it. Yet, one can blow for the other. Another din, the yachid shalei beirach, ein chaveira mevarach olav. Wow. What's meant us? So we're learning mevarach means saying the Shemoneh Esrei. So now the Gemara is introducing something before the next sugya. We're going to learn soon about the whole concept that a shliach tzibur is being moitzi the rabbin. We're going to actually come to the conclusion that the Rabban Gamliel understands that the shliach tzibur's power of exempting the tzibur is not because of shemei koina. No, more than that. Even if a person is not in shul, if they have a halachically valid reason for not coming into shul, they're in oinas, the shliach tzibur's prayer is for them. Like in the Beis HaMikdash, when the Korban Talmud was brought, not everyone was there. It's being brought for him, not Shemei Kohen. Whatever the power of the Shliach Tzibur is, that's by the repetition. The private, silent Shemoneh Esrei prayer, you have to daven it. This Tana holds that if we're just Yechidim, there's no minyan. And a person, again, they didn't have machzoirim. You knew how to daven the Shemoneh Esrei. You know how to do it. So I'm going to say, daven loud, and I'll listen to you. Says the Brisa, by a yochid, it does not even work. Shofar, I can hear from you. The silent Shemoneh Esrei, say it, and if a person doesn't know it, then you can't say it. Then you'll rely on the Shliach Tzibur's tefillah somewhere out there. Okay. Next then, if a person has to pick and choose, so we clarify, when can I not rely on the davener? B'yachid, but b'tzibur, absolutely yes. So let me ask, if a person, Reuven has a shofar, nor does Reuven even know how to say the brachas of Musaf. It's very long. There was no machzoidim then. So he has to go to a group. He has to go to a minyan. What happens if there are 2 minyanim in his vicinity and he can't go to both? There's not enough time. In one, there's a minyan, there's a shliach tzibur that knows the Musaf by heart, that will daven the brachas, but in that shul, there is no shofar. In the other location, there's a shofar, but they don't know how to daven. So if a person has to choose, says the Braisa, choose the shofar more than the Shemoneh Esrei. And can go. Now, of course, if you can do both, go to both. If you can't, in one there's a shofar. Uba'achas mevarchim means they're making the davening. The shliach tzibur is going to daven the Shemona Esrei. Says the Beraisa, if you have to pick and choose, what's more important? The shofar. End of Beraisa asks the Gemara, why do I need this din in the Beraisa? Pshita, had the Oiraisa. And yeah, we had psukim and remazim, but still davening is the way we daven. This doesn't mean the Rabbanan. That's the big machlokes is Tefilla Doiraisa, Tefilla Rabbanan. Right? The Ramban says that the daily prayer is the Rabbanan. The Rambam writes davening every day is a midoiraisa. This goes according to everyone. The specific seder and the nusach of the malchi is a cheresh shayf. If you miss that, then you didn't fulfill the Rabbanan. I want to add something important that if a person on Rosh, then when they had no machzorim, if a person didn't know the brachas by heart, they would daven at least the first three and the last three. They would daven the most they could. Okay, that's another whole topic. Shemona Esrei, is it a sum zero game? The first three have to be davened together. The last three have to be davened together. And if you don't daven all the in-between ones, even if you did not fulfill the obligation, but you daven to God, you were supplicating to God. This whole topic, if a person forgot Yalav Yovei, does it mean that they made a Tefilla Levatola? Absolutely not. They were not Yoitza, the Rabbanan of saying Shemona Esrei et Yalav Yovei, but they davened. Anyways, coming over here, I said the Rabbanan, what's the no-brainer? Says the Gemara, no, Lo Tzricha, Afal Gav Doha Vadai. Where you live, there's nothing. You have to pick where are you going to walk towards. In one area, you know for sure there's a minyan and there's a shliach tzibur. In the other place, there's no machzer. But maybe there's a shofar. A suffix d'oraisa versus a vaday d'rabbanan. That's Rosh Hashana. That's the chiddush. That even only a suffix d'oraisa trumps a vaday d'rabbanan. Oy, does this grow? This is a big topic, but we have to move on. Next, so the last topic that the Mishnah addressed on Daf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis is the machlokes between the Chachamim and Rabban Gamliel. The Chachamim say that what everyone has to daven. And then the Baal Tefillah repeats, and of course, if someone doesn't know how to daven, then he'll rely on the Shliach Tzibur. So Rabban Gamliel says the Shliach Tzibur is moitze. Everyone will clarify what he means. We'll clarify. Now the pashtus of the Mishnah is there's something called Shemea Ka'ina, but the Chachamim say only rely on that if you have no option. If you have no option. What are we talking about? We're talking about the Musav of Rosh. No, we're talking about all Shemona Esreis. We're talking about the last machlokes in Rosh Hashana is broader than only Rosh Hashana, but we'll see that it has a unique application. So now we're going to develop this machlokes. Says the Gemara, Tanya, more details of the back and forth. Amru loy lir Rabban Gamliel. The Chachamim who say that if you know how to daven Shemona Esrei, Rosh Hashana during the week, Shabbos, don't rely on the Shliach Tzibur. They told him lidvarecha. You, Rabban Gamliel, say that even if a yachid knows the Tefilla, he could lechatchila rely on the Shliach Tzibur. So lama Tefilla. Lama tzibur mispalalim, meaning why do we daven balachash? Yakir, that's what it means. No, it's according to Rabbi Gamliel. There was always tefillas balachash, the silent amidah, and then the repetition. Why is there ever a silent if you hold that lechatchila everyone can listen to the shliach tzibur? And you should know that there were other areas in halacha, for example, in the times of Chazal benching, when there was benching with the zimun, and there was benching with the zimun, only the one that led the zimun benched. That's the way it was. Many years later, first of all, we have Sidurim. Second of all, at a certain period, a few hundred years ago, the Chachamim decided that we don't have enough Kavana power because when it's Shemea Ka'ina, if I am not doing it, I'm listening to you, I have to stay focused the whole time. Without any distraction, that's very difficult. It's very difficult. But other than that side issue that I don't have the mental power, benching was done by one. So why do you have to have a silent Shemona Esrei? So Amar Lahem, listen to this. I'm sorry. They asked the Rabban Gamliel, why do you have to have us? Now listen to these words. Really, you don't need that. The main tefillah of Rabban Gamliel is the tefillah of the Shliach Tzibur. Do you know why there is prior to the Shliach Tzibur's davening a silent Shemona Esrei? Kedei lahazdir Shliach Tzibur as tefillah asoi. to make sure that he has an opportunity to organize, to prep, to get it right. This is all when they had no siddur, all when they had no machzor.
You have like a few minutes quiet and only the.
Which means, like Shlomo is saying, that theoretically, all he needed was a few minutes quiet. If people are quiet anyway, you might as well say Shemona Esrei. Let me use the way this is.
Is everybody saying Shemona Esrei then?
I'm Mr. Danny.
Is everybody saying Shemona Esrei at that time that we're talking about? This
The reason why they instituted the silent Shemona Esrei was really the primary prayers only of the Shliach Tzibur. It's not a b'di'evid. He's davening for everyone. But since he has to be lahasder tefillah right before, so let everyone else say the Shemona Esrei. Good, right. Now let's go in reverse. You who disagree with me, you hold that the main davening every day is the Yechidim davening, and now guys, bit tzibur. Okay, but tefillah's bit tzibur means I'm davening at the same time that you, when you have 10 Jews or more davening, that's a tefillah bit tzibur. Why do you have to have the repetition? So they told him that was secondary. It's mamish. Why does the ikir tefillah? You know what they told? You know what the Chachamim hold? The main tefillah is the yachid. But some people don't know how to daven. So for them, you have a shliach tzibur. Amar Lahem, to which Rabban Gamliel completely disagrees, and he says that you don't understand the institution of the shliach tzibur. It's not a second b'di'evid. No, kishem shemoitzi es she'eino baki, kach moitzi es habaki. Now let's go weiter. Now we're going to have a little bit back and forth. According to some, the Chachamim acquiesced to Rabban Gamliel. Omar Rabba bar bar Chana, Omar Rabbi Yochanan. They used to have an argument, and once it's written in the Mishnah, that's the rule. Not written. Once people reviewed it by heart, they never made emendations. It wouldn't even work. But there came a certain time where Moedim Chachamim el Rabban Gamliel, they retracted their position. They hold that the main tefillah is shliach tzibur. Yachid is only kedei lahasder. Now, did they indeed retract? Rav argues with Rabbi Yochanan, and he says, "Adayni machloikus." And some more back and forth. Shama Rabbi Chia, Berei the Rabbi Bar Nachmani. That what? That Rabbi Yochanan said that what? That the Chachamim retracted their position. So he went and he repeated this. Amar l'shmaitza kamei Rav Dimi bar Chinana. Amar le Rav Dimi told Rabbi Chia, no, don't. He didn't say it's a machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Rav. He told that the Chachamim actually agree now. So he told him, no, Rav says, Adayin hi machlokes. Rabbi Chia says, I know that not everyone agrees with Rabbi Yochanan. I want you to know what Rabbi Yochanan says. Amar lei, so Rabbi Chia responded that Amar lei, Rabbi Bar Chana nami yachik Amar. I know that not everyone agreed with Rabbi Yochanan. He himself said that when Rabbi Yochanan said, Lahash Maisa, that what? That Rabbi Yochanan, that the Chachamim at a certain point, they agreed with Rabbi Gamliel. So Rabbi Yochanan shared that if Ligalei Reish Lakish or Rabbi Bar Chana told me that Reish Lakish argued, for Amar Adayni Machlokes. Frag the Gemara, hold on. Okay, so it's a machlokes, but Rabbi Yochanan holds that what? That the Chachamim retracted. Amar Rabbi Yochanan hachi. Same twice today. Rabbi Yochanan made a statement. Did he say so? In the name of Rabbi Yochanan, regarding the ending of Rosh Hashana, regarding this question whether listening to the Shliach Tzibur is a lachatchila dika thing, even if you're not a daven, or the way we're going to word it again in a moment is the ikir tefillah, the tefillah of the tzibur, not tefillah bit tzibur, but tefillah shel tzibur. Rabbi Yochanan said the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel. What does that imply? That there's an argument. Because if Rabbi Yochanan would have felt that the Chachamim acquiesced to him, then he wouldn't say halacha ke Rabban Gamliel, because then everyone is on the same page. Daf lamed hey answers the Gemara. Oh, that was a big problem. Kisalik Rab Abba miyamei. Rab Abba was going on a sea journey. What does the Yid do on a ship? He learns Torah. When he came back, he was enlightened. He came back on, he knew the teretz, Periscope. And what did he say? That there's two issues. There is our Mishnah was very broad about all Shemona Esreis. When did Rabbi Yochanan say that the Chachamim ultimately agreed with Rabbi Gamliel? They no longer argue, only on Rosh Hashana. We'll see in a moment why that's different. Moedim Chachamim Gamliel bebracha shel Rosh Hashana, and automatically on the brachas of Yovel of Yom Kippur. However, the other statement that you have that Rabbi Yochanan says halacha ke Rabbi Gamliel, which implies that even Rabbi Yochanan is moided that the Chachamim argue, that's bebrachas the Chalashana. So they argue always. Question is, when were the Chachamim moided, according to Rabbi Yochanan? only by Rosh Hashana. That's not good enough. Which also implies that even on Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur Yovel, there is still an argument. So says the Gemara, Elo Amar Nachman by Yitzchak, Man Moedim that Rabbi Yechanan was referring to, that's only Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir holds that the Chachamim conceded regarding Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur. Not Rabbi Meir, even according to Rabbi Yechanan, they never conceded. The Machlokes stands. And on that, Rabbi Yechanan Paskin, like Rabbi Gamliel, that the halacha mechlal the pligi rabbanan, the Tanya bracha shel Rosh Hashana Yom Kippurim, Yom Kippurim Chavra, according to most of the Shainim, means Yover Yom Kippur. Shliach tzibur moitzi yisrav nechavasan. Moitzi means yakir. Even if you're not a dav on the Shemona Esrei, there's no silent. Shliach tzibur davos. Divrei Rab Meir. Chachamim oimrim no. Kishem shliach tzibur chayiv. Kachol yochel chayiv. So here you clearly see, right, that there is a unique machlokes regarding Rosh Hashana. Now, why would Rosh Hashana be different? Ma ishna hani. So, lema because dinefishi kra'i, because you have to quote all the psukim that we learned above. Lechatchila 10 psukim, Aliyah is 10 psukim. There was no machzoidim, there was no sidurim. So not everyone had enough information. Now we're going to introduce something amazing that we never learned above. When we learned all of the shitas, whether it's, remember, there was 10 or 7, remember 3. Now we're going to learn a new din. V'ha'amar Rab Chanan el Amarav, that kiven she'amar uveseirazcha kasuv leimor shuv ein tzarech. You're taking away the parnasa of all of the Balei Tefilla, that they can't wait to gargle zechayis on Rosh Hashana. That really, now there's a machlekes how to apply that. Whether that means you don't have to quote the psukim for Musaf, or the way Tosfos clearly holds that Rabbeinu Tam holds. No. You have the psukim of Musaf, you have to quote, as we always do in Shemona Esrei Yantiv. But when it comes to all of the psukim of Malchus, Zechrenis, and Shofres, you don't have to quote any psukim. You can say that ubeseirazcha kasuv leimor, and that's it. You know what, we find something very interesting. And I think there's a hayom yom that a person should articulate that I'm davening according to all of the kavanos of the Arizal. And that's enough. This is for sure connected to this topic. So you can't say that since there are many psukim, that's why we rely on the Shliach Tzibur. If that's the only issue, we could rely on the statement that taught in the name of Rav, that really you don't have to quote any Venemar. So when it's getting late Musaf and people want to go home, imagine if a Gabbai would know that. He would tell the Chevraman to jump 5 pages. Just say over Seroscha Kosav Leimor.
Navi and Ksuvim.
In other words, none of the 10 psukim, not one has to be quoted.
You can't just say with Seroscha Kosav Leimor and be able to say all 10. You would have to also say Uben Nevi'im.
No. I don't think so. I think that's the key word, because Torah can also refer to Tanach. Oh, Ella, the reason why you can rely, and let's go according to Rabbi Meir, right? According to Rabbi Yechanan, the Chachamim were moided to Rabbi Meir because the Avashei Brachos. Forget about aside of the psukim. Okay, we know Shemona Esrei because we say it every day. Even Shabbos once a week. Some people get confused. When do we say Yismach Moshe? Is it that people get confused? And Friday night is Kedusha. We have to remember that Shabbos day is the Simcha. Ata Echad. But when it comes to Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur, it's very long. It's new brachas. We're introducing brachas that you only say once a year. No, forget about the aside of the psukim. The ikir bracha that ends with melech, with malchias, or zoicher habris, zuchroine, shoyfer, shemea, kol truos am yisrael barachman. Because of the difficulty, because it's very rarely said. That's why, according to Rabbi Yechanan, even the chachamim were moida that you don't, that the shliach tzibur can say it. Now let's go back to this topic. Go for we learned above. When a person, when the Baal Tefilla says, or when a yachid says, no difference. As it's written in the Torah, in the brach of Malchias, you say and then to make everyone happy, and that's it, you're good. And then in the Shofres and Zechrein, Shuvin Etzarech. So Savur Minei, wow, like what a what's it called? There's a lesson in English. You tricked the system, you hacked. It's a Savur Minei Hanemile biyachid. But the tzibur, to tolerate that from the shliach tzibur, loy. Omar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, no, echad yachid ve'echad tzibur. Kiven she'amer v'serascha kasuv leimoir shuv einoi tzarech. Let's go weiter. Omar Rabbi Lazar. Now that we quoted, according to Rabban Gamliel, really the main Shemona Esrei always is the shliach tzibur's loud Shemona Esrei. Eloma, we also have the silent individual Shemona Esrei prior. Secondary, really to allow the shliach tzibur to prepare, says Rabbi Lazar, oilam yasir adam tefillah v'char kach yispalo. So let me go better. Forget about the shliach tzibur. I'm davening biyachid. It's important before you daven to review. Again, they had no sidurim. It's today very much. There's a din in Shulchan Aruch that a Bal Qaeda should review before you do something. Make sure you have it better. Unless you have a gabbai like here with the hand signalers, then you're good. Anyways, Omar Rab Abba Nestabre Mile de Rabbi Lazar. When does he say that a yachid has to be mesader? That's only taka on the brachas of Rosh Hashana or of Yom Kippur, either Yovel, or by the way, it can even mean in this context, Yom Kippur, something that you don't say that often. Vishal Pirakim, clear. Shal Pirakim means it's something that you don't say. You know what? Musav of Rosh Chodesh. But, or Yalav Yave, anything that they only said on occasion. Avo, the Chol Hashana. But before you daven every day, we daven 3 times a day. What is Rabbi Lazar saying that I have to be mesader in my tefillah? I was just mesader it last tefillah. I know it. Rav Yehuda, guys, buckle your seatbelts. Don't be shocked. Rav Yehuda, mesader Siyum Massechta. Rav Yehuda, before he davened the normal Shemona Esrei, he would take time and he would review it to get the seder correct. So the Gemara says, of course, because Rav Yehuda only davened once in 30 days. Shani Rav Yehuda, given the Matlas Yom and the Hava Matzle, he davened once in 30 days, then it's considered Kippurakim. Kippurakim means like it's only on occasion. How can it be that a Yid like Rav Yehuda davened once in 30 days? So that's the big topic. Mikan, the Ramban writes, the Ramban we just quoted, Machlekes Ramban and Rambam and many others, whether the tefillah, daily tefillah is midoiraisa, whether you're obligated. When you have an issue, when you talk to God, that's tefillah midoiraisa according to everyone. Are you mechuyev to daven at least once, or we say twice a day? The Ramban says no. The haraya from Rav Yehuda. Now, Rav Yehuda was on the level of Teirasai Umunasai. We learned about that. That's a very high madrega like the Rashbi. Someone who was on the level of Teirasai Umunasai, Taka doesn't have to daven every day. So why did he daven once in 30 days? Because it took Rav Yehuda, we learned, just 30 days to chazer his whole Torah. So during the 30 days of chazara, can you imagine these Yidden? It's amazing. Then he was learning Torah. According to the Ramban, even if he was learning Torah, if tefillah daily would have been midoiraisa, he would have been mechuyev to be mafsek. The Rambam disagrees with that. The Rambam disagrees with us that we are mechuyev to daven midoiraisa. Nor was then. Don't think Rabbi Yehuda didn't daven at all. He said words of prayer. He could have said moida ani. He did something that covered the minimum, and only if a yid is teirasai menasai on that level, then they were exempt of many mitzvahs, including davening. So going back, Rabbi Yehuda, who davened once in 30 days, he was mesader his tefillah. His whole life was reviewing. So it's amazing. So before he davened, he went over reviewing, can be mental. It definitely does not mean to say the words with Shem Hashem. But whatever I need, whatever technique I need to make sure I got to say the right. Many of us, we learned the Gemaras by heart, my modern by heart. For me, the hardest thing was always remembering the Hemshech HaDvarim, the link. What comes after what? That's called the Seder. That's hard. You have to make simonim. Do what you need to do. Make mnemonics.
You remember the whole Torah in 30 days, but didn't remember it all?
No, he remembered it because he reviewed it, and then he came to the davening. He went over the tefillah in his mind. This is going to be the final topic of the Masechta. Now that we established that according to Rabban Gamliel, the main prayer is that of the Shliach Tzibur. We'll call that the Tefillah Shel Tzibur. And the Tefillas, the silent individual prayer, is only secondary, really instituted to give the Shliach Tzibur an opportunity to review. Says Rab Acha, the name of Rav Shimon Chasida, Poiter Hoya Rabban Gamliel Afilu Olam Shebesodos. It's important. Lest you think that when I hear the Shliach Tzibur, I'm getting my mitzvah because of Shemea Ko'ina. No. Even, now word even is very problematic, but let's quote the words. Even if a Yid is not in shul, since the Shliach Tzibur daven the repetition, then our community daven Shachris. Mamish, like in the Beis HaMikdash, they brought a carbon Talmud every day. Did you have to see it? We had representatives, but you didn't have to be there. The Shliach Tzibur is the communal representative to daven. Even people that are not there will be exempted from the tefillah of the Shliach Tzibur. Now look at the kasha. The Gemara, even means for sure the people in shul. The Gemara is asking on Rabban Gamliel. No. Now that they made a takana, secondary, that people should daven the silent Shemona Esrei for the Shliach Tzibur. But now that they made that takana, even Rabban Gamliel, when you are in shul, you got to say it. If you know it. Rabbi Gamliel, the statement should have been that if you are in shul, then you have to say it on your own. If you couldn't make it to shul, then introduce the concept that the Shliach Tzibur's tefillah covers, he represented you. The people that are not in shul, we can call them an oinus. Now you can go, why are they oinus means that it's beyond their control. We're not going into the details of was it really beyond your control. But if you are not here right now, you're a working man, you couldn't make it to shul, then there was something about they davened in shul, which helped you. They davened for you. But the people that are in shul, and you know how to daven, after they said that a yachid should also daven, kedei lahastir, hani lo yanisi, and we find such a difference. Where do we find such a difference? By heart, that if you are in shul and the kohen is giving a bracha, we all know this from our shul, from every shul. We have to make an effort to make sure that we are not standing behind the kahanim, which can happen, like over here, by the Rebbe. The Rebbe would walk off his bima to make sure that he's not behind the kahanim, but we also know that the yidden that are not in shul are getting the bracha of the kahanim. And we don't say over here that the yidden that live over there towards Fairfax, they're out. We don't say that. No, we find the difference that if you are in shul, more is demanded of you. If you couldn't make it to shul, then you can rely on. So it should be the same thing over here. The Tani Abba Bereid Rav B'Yam Bar Chia, Am Sha'achoyrei Kahanim Einam B'Chal Bracha. In the shul. And again, what's missing is, yet the people that are in the fields, they are included. So we are more meticulous on the people that are here. So Rabbi Gamliel should be saying, Afilu am shebesodes, and Taki, he never said that. We got the wrong version. Ela ki yasa Ravin Amar Rabbi Yaakov Baridi, Amar Rebbe Shimon Chasida. Loi patar Rabban Gamliel Ela am shebesodes. And Taki, why? Because the Anisi b'malach, people that were unable to make it to shul because they have to work. Since Rabbi Gamliel understands tefillah primarily to be tefillah shel tzibur, one representing all, the kohen bringing the carbon on behalf of all, whether you want to look at this as mitam shlichus, which is an anomaly, because normally by a mitzvah shebegufay, there's no shlichus. Here I have to daven, whether it's doiraisa or the rabbanan, yet the shliach tzibur can daven on our behalf. Says Rabbi Gamliel Chevre that people that are not in shul, taka don't even have to hear it. People that are in shul, now that the concept of kedei lahastir as tefillah, so now that they enacted what we call tefillah bitzibur, yechidim davening at the same time, you can't be exempt of that. Now, if you don't know how to daven, of course, shemei kohen. Bottom line is, we have a machlokes. What's the ikar tefillah? Just to share this part of the Rebbe in a minute, if it's possible. And that is that Rabbi Gamliel understands tefillah is tefillah of the shliach tzibur. That's the ikar. The Chachamim hold the main tefillah is the yechidim's davenings together. And the Rebbe says this is really the underlying machlokes is if you have to choose between kamos and echos, quality versus quantity. That's a very important question. That is the argument that the Rabban Gamliel always gave more credence to echos, to quality, and the shliach tzibur, as we know from Shulchan Aruch and prior. The level of the shliach tzibur, he has to be a yid of greater echos, like the kohen in the Beis HaMikdash, v'chulei v'chulei. The other side is many people are davening. The advantage of saying that tefillah is mainly many yechidim with a minyan, but every yechidim means kamos. The chachamim hold kamos is machriya echos. And Rabban Gamliel, Lishitasin, that was the one that linked our whole ending with brachas, with the famous story there in Daf Chav Zayin, Daf Chav Ches, that when Rabban Gamliel was the Nasi, if you were not Toichoy Kabara, you're not coming into the Beis Medrash. More people are going to be learning. I want quality. I don't need the Yechidim. I need the one that has a qualitative edge. And Ula Yeshleimer, that it's amazing that even though it's a little bit negay to Rosh Hashana, but this last topic is really a broader topic about Tefilla B'chlal. Why is it here in Rosh Hashana? Because that's exactly what Rosh Hashana is. As we learn in Hasidus, it's not the beginning of the year. Rosh Hashana means that there are certain moments in the year that everything that's going to happen in the year is nichlal in the Rosh. That's the meaning of a Nasi. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the Chachamim agreed with Rabbi. There's not even a machloikas that we should understand that there is a Rosh, that there is a moment in time, which is Rosh Hashana, that everything that happens in the year happens in Rosh Hashana. That's the koyach of Rosh Hashana. In Ba'ofen Eichusi, because it's in a very small amount of time. And then it expresses itself throughout the year. And the same thing you have in a Yid. So the Nasi Yisrael has in him HaNasi Hu HaKoil. This concept. The Rosh Hashana, the Rosh B'nai Yisrael Rebbe. And then you have in Makom, as we know in Hasidus, that Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim, and Harabayis, and Makom HaMikdash, that is the whole world is there. And everything that happens in the world is just an extension of that which is happening in Makom. So there's a concept of Kamos and Echus, and Rabban Gamliel, as the Nasi, celebrates the concept of Echus, and the Chachamim, the way the Rebbe explains it, is celebrating the concept of Kamos. And just to make it clear that the Rebbe, the sheet of our Rebbe is that Kamos is Machriya Echus, that we celebrate Kamos, especially before Mashiach. Because if we're going to go to Echus, like Rabban Gamliel did, Halavai, people should learn in the Beis Medrash. You're not allowing people to come learn. But not only is that Kamos is, if you have to pick and choose, Kamos will trump over Echus. But when you have a lot of Kamos, you ultimately, from the Kamos, also get the Echus. Chevra Mazel Tov. And God willing, tomorrow, Tainus.
All right, then we learned that Reb Yosef was chosen over Rabbah because Reb Yosef was chosen to be Rosh Hashiva over Rabbah.
Very good.
Because they said that Kamos trumps Echus.
That's right.
Learn that in whatever Masechta that was.
Yeah, you know what? I wonder if that ever mentions that, at least in the footnotes, in Chelik Chavdal, page 95. That's a good point. Okay.